talking to you about understanding the inner world of a grieving child. First, let me just check to see if you can hear me okay. If you can, would you please send me a chat message in the lower left hand of your screen, please, in the chat box there. And just let me know if you can hear me or not. Just to tell you just a little bit about myself briefly, as I said, I am Dr. Cora Ruff. I am a registered nurse. I am a retired associate nursing professor and have spent many years in nursing doing a number of things, but my most rewarding is serving as a bereavement facilitator and an end-of-life nurse educator. I have been doing this now for just about 15 years. This is actually the fourth webinar that I have done for Dr. David and Sherry. I would like to thank them for this wonderful opportunity again. I have done one on living fully after loss, was my first one. Then I did one on losses, spousal losses for widows and widowers. And then I did one on coping with the holidays while grieving. And this one, of course, is the inner world of the grieving child, which is quite timely, actually, because of all the events that have been in the media recently, with the untimely death following the shooting of the 9-year-old out in Tucson. And it's a very important time for parents right now because children are hearing these events, they are hearing about them, and they begin to be fearful because of all that's going on in the world right now. It's not easy to hide it from them. In fact, we encourage you not to hide it from them, but use this as an opportunity to talk to them about it. They may have some fears. They may be very concerned about their welfare or your welfare. So take this as the opportunity to talk to them about what's going on using simple language, but letting them know that you understand their fears. And if they do verbalize some fears or express some fears, just explain to them that yes, it is a difficult time in our history, but let them know what you're doing to keep yourself safe as well as keeping them safe because children do worry about their safety and your safety. So we'll be talking more about how to talk to children about death and dying and all those kinds of things. But this is a great opportunity, a teachable moment as we call it. So I'm going to be talking to you tonight about several things with reference to grief in children. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the losses that children do have. Then we're going to talk about some of the myths about grieving children. We're going to talk about some of the manifestations about it and some of the developmental tasks that all children need to go through to successfully grieve their losses. And then I'm going to talk about how to approach talking about death and also how to talk to children about funerals and all those kinds of things. Finally, we'll include some more strategies for helping grieving children and end with some resources to help grieving children. All right. I just want to say here, you see here a picture of my book entitled Her Light Still Shines. It is dedicated to the memory of my 21-year-old daughter. And it was her untimely death at the age of 21 that actually got me started on this journey of talking about grief and helping to educate and support others who are grieving. So I'm coming on to her, what we call her Wings Day, January 31st, which is the day that she lost her life in a car accident in the Dominican Republic, where she had actually gone to serve as a missionary. And some construction equipment ran into her car, and she did not survive her wounds. So I'm kind of dedicating tonight's presentation to her memory. All right, moving along then to tonight's presentation. When we talk about grief and grieving, we have to start with talking about loss, because loss is actually the end or change of a familiar pattern of living or behavior. It actually is anything that we do that's out of the ordinary that changes for us. So whatever patterns of behavior that we accustomed to, when we change those, if we notice a loss. And losses do occur from those very simple losses to the more extreme or those gigantic losses. And it is then the response or the reaction to the loss that is what we call grief. So grief is the normal, natural reaction to loss of any kind. It's a both physical, emotional, a psychological, spiritual response. All of our body systems do come to play when we grieve, and we'll see a little bit more, hear a little bit more about that as we go along. Grief is a very, very complex process, and it is influenced by a number of things, including our past experiences, our religious beliefs, our socioeconomic status, our health, the cause of the death, and I forgot to add, of course, age. Age is a big factor in how we grieve. So that brings us to the subject of childhood losses. 1 in 20 children lose a parent before the age of 15, and 1 out of 7 will lose a parent or a sibling before they reach the age of 20. So that's a tremendous amount of loss due only to a parent or a sibling. You add to that the death of a friend. Of course, the death of a pet is a significant loss for children. Then when you look at other losses, relocation is a tremendous loss, not only for children, but for adults as well. 1 out of 6 families move in 3 to 5 years. And with the changes that we're seeing now, the numbers may have increased even more. This means the child lose the family, and the child, of course, will lose their home, their friends, their familiar school and teachers. They'll also go into a new neighborhood. They'll have new peers. They'll have new teachers. Tremendous, tremendous losses, and it's especially hard for male children. Of course, the effects of this seem to be resolved fairly quickly. Other losses that children have: relationship losses. When there is a divorce or separation in the family, this impacts the children tremendously. This often then is followed by relocation again, so it's a double whammy for these children who experience a divorce or separation in their families. With the unemployment situation as it is, there is a lot of relocation, a lot of separation, tremendous losses for children. We often don't think about the loss due to incarceration of a family member, a parent, or sibling who becomes incarcerated. And then there's also the loss that results from parents who may suffer from alcohol or drug addiction and may be absent in terms of parenting the child. So that those are also losses. So you can see how there's a tremendous amount of loss that our children are faced with almost on a daily basis. And when we think about those losses, there are a number of myths that come to mind. One of which, that young children do not grieve. Well, that is really a myth, because we all grieve. And if we can imagine what it feels like as an adult to grieve, then certainly children will also grieve. Another myth about grieving is that children should go to funerals, or children should not go to funerals. Either one of these, both of these are myths. And the key word here is should, because there's no one thing that children should do or should not do. We need to let children have some say in what's to happen, what's to um, what's to occur here. I just will uh, just want to add a couple of things here about going to funerals. I will talk a little bit more about the funeral as we go along, but right now just dealing with the myth. So if children are going to go, let them have a say into it. They should not be forced to go. But if they want to participate, if they want to go, give them that option. And we'll talk about preparing the child for attending a funeral. So I won't say any more about that right here. Another myth is that children get over loss quickly. Do any of us get over the loss quickly? It takes us old folks a mighty long time, and most of us a lifetime. So you can only imagine that children do not get over loss quickly either. What actually happens is that children don't stay in their grief and grieving state for long periods. They grieve and play, and they grieve and play. And that's why we kind of understood it as they are over their grief. Well, children do not get over their grief quickly. So that's a myth. Another myth is that children will be permanently scarred by significant loss. Well, we all are resilient. Children are resilient as well. So they are not going to be permanently scarred. With proper support and reassurance and given the okay, given permission to grieve, children will do fine. So they'll not be scarred by that. Another myth is that children should be encouraged to talk about their feelings of grief, and that that's the best way to work through it. Well, the operative word here is the best way. It's not necessarily the best way because we are all individuals, as our children are all individuals. So talking about the grief may not be the best thing for that particular child. There are other ways of expressing grief. Some of those things include singing, drawing in the arts, and writing and dancing and any number of things. So children will do very well with expressing their grief in other forms in addition to talking about it. So those are just some of the myths, and you may know of some other myths to add to the list here. All right, so having said that, then let's look at how children understand grief, because it really depends upon the developmental stage that they are in as to how they understand it. For example, when we think about infants, birth to 2 years, for example, they can't tell us they're grieving and they won't cry at a loss. But what happens is the very young children, infants, will be responsive to stress and distress in their parents, in the moms. So the emotional state of the mom will influence the small children in such ways as they will be fretful and maybe colicky and maybe crying a lot, maybe not feeding very well, and those kinds of things. So that's pretty much what we see in very young children in grief situations. But the 3 to 5 year old, for example, if you tell them that grandpa is dead and not coming back or never coming back, they don't understand never. So they don't know what that means. They see death as temporary. They think that Okay, you said they died. Okay, so they're going to come back tomorrow. So tomorrow they'll come and ask again, well, can't we go and see Grandpa? And then this gets reinforced in some of the things that happen on TV when they see someone killed, and then the next day they see the person again. So they will be expecting the person uh, to return. As a result of this, then they'll have repetitive questions. For example, you do the explaining to the best of your ability, and then the end of the day, they come back with another question. Well, can't we go and see Grandpa? Oh, well, you remember what we said, Grandpa died and he's not coming back. Oh, all right. So you have to keep repeating what you said about the death and not coming back again. Children of this age will be able to feel things like they'll be able to tell you about when they feel sad or when they're mad about something or scared. And at this age, the separation is of great concern, especially from the mom. So these are some of the things that happen in the 3-year-old, 3 to 5-year-old rather. Now, I might just say here that I'm putting these into categories, and we know that children develop at different levels and at different speeds. So some may do it earlier than others, but these are just general frameworks here. The 6 to 8-year-old child here, they are in the period of magical thinking, and they may feel like something they said caused the person to die. For example, if they got mad with their grandpa or their mom or dad and said, I wish you would die, and then all of a sudden the person dies, well, they are convinced that, it was because of what they said. So we need to reassure them that it was nothing they said that caused the death, nor is there anything that they said that would have prevented the death. So, and they do at this stage understand the concept of death. I'm getting a tickle in my throat here. And they do understand that the person's not going to return. As a result, they may sometimes have their fears manifested in physical symptoms, for example. So definitely there will be some self-blaming. All right, the 9 to 12-year-old then, here they will go to a further extent of feeling like they're responsible for the person's death. And as a result, their behavior will change tremendously with moodiness and some anger and even misbehaving, for example. They will grieve in short spurts as well because they can't stay in grief for long periods of time. So, having given just that brief synopsis of grief in children at certain ages, it is the environment in which children live that they learn about grief and grieving. So children do learn what they live. For example, we as adults in the family are the role models for our children. If we hide our grief, if we hide our tears, if the children never see us cry or never see us sad, then they will understand that it's not okay to cry and it's not okay to be sad. So consequently, you will never see the children be sad or cry. They will, if we don't talk about it, they won't talk about it. So we have to give them permission to talk about um, the loved one, talk about the person who died. And we give them permission by doing it ourselves. So it is important that we talk about the loved one, giving the child permission, that we let them see us cry. Don't hide the tears when they want to come. Let them come. Because that's how children learn. They learn from us. Now, how do children manifest their grief? There are a lot of characteristics of grieving children. As I said, you will see oftentimes with the younger kids in particular that they're crying one moment and the next moment they're out playing. But as the children get a little bit older, there's certain things to look for here. One is behavior changes. Maybe they are not eating as well, maybe they are not sleeping as well, or maybe they're acting out. Maybe they have never been one to act out before, but all of a sudden they're acting out in school. Or maybe they've been very good students and all of a sudden now their school performance is declining. Maybe they don't like playing with their Game Boy or whatever it is they traditionally like to play with. They don't like to do the things that they used to do. So we can see then that that's evidence of grief behavior in children. There may be mood swings or maybe some withdrawal, for example. But these are signs to look for in your children if there has been a significant loss in the family or someone close to the child. So we want to be able to try and help children who are grieving. And there are certain things that children need to do. There are 4 developmental tasks that children need to undergo and experience, and we need to help them with it. The first developmental task of grieving children is to recognize the reality of the death. And by that, I mean, be honest about it. Use the real word, use died or death or is dying. Don't be afraid of the D word. Not don't use such things as he went to sleep or he went on a vacation or she's just away or and of course children are so literal that if you say dad is sleeping, they're going to take that literal. And then you get into additional issues with the child and being afraid to go to sleep because they may not come back or they may have to be buried or those kinds of things. So use the proper terms and be honest about it. If the death was the result of of some kind of violence, be honest about that and explain what happened in as simple terms as possible, trying not to give too much detail, but keeping it simple. And trying to keep secrets will not work. Secrets do manage to get out. Excuse me. And when they ask questions, give them honest answers and welcome their questions. Because if we don't welcome their questions, they are going to stop asking them. I'm reminded of a story where the parent had given her child 2 questions a day. Excuse me. She had said to the child, you will have 2 questions a day that you can ask. And the child, and she said, if you ask more than 2, you're going to have to go to your room and think about it. After a while, the child stopped asking questions because she knew what was going to happen. So we don't want to cut off communication. The second developmental task is to grieve the death. Children do need to grieve the death. And this is where we're able to help them with the grief. Children, especially younger ones, as I said, they play and grieve and play, and they alternate. And then they ask questions, and then they grieve again and play again. They do have short attention spans, so they will They'll ask you and then they'll forget and come back and ask you again. But be patient with them, but also give them the opportunity to have fun when they feel like having fun. They don't have to be sad all the time. Let them go out and play and have some fun. Another thing that's important to do with grieving children, children do have feelings. They will feel sad and they'll feel angry and fearful, but they'll also be happy during bereavement. And that's to be expected. But try and do some fun activities with them. And that's where grieving bereavement camps come in. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But fun activities really help to reduce the stress of grief for children. And it also helps them to accept the living without the person. So some fun activities for your children might include obviously going to camp and painting and drawing and dancing and singing, any number of things. So just using appropriate humor with your children is also a great way to help them intersperse some fun with their grief. So that's the second developmental task. Now, the third developmental task is to commemorate the person who died. When someone dies, we all need to do something. Um, so doing something can include talking about the person who died, writing to the person who died, collecting pictures. Children need to tell their story repeatedly. They need to be encouraged to talk about their mom or their dad or their best friend or their dog that they've had all of their lives. So let them tell their story over and over again, just as we adults need to tell our story over and over again. They may also be encouraged to make something to remember their loved one. They can make puzzles. They can, if they can sew, help them put some things together. Also, let them even use some of their loved ones' things, some of their belongings. They may be able to use grandpa's hammer or any number of things that would remind them of their loved one. We also need to help the children celebrate the person's life. And you can do this together. It's a great activity. You can do so by planting a tree in memory of the loved one. You can look at photos together. You can go on trips, go to places that the loved one enjoyed going. Just having fun as you commemorate the person who died along with your child. So do these activities as a family. And this is a great way to help your children as they grieve. The fourth and final developmental task is to move on to new relationships. And that means developing relationships with new and different people, but also continuing a different relationship with the person who died. And in this, when we talk about a relationship with a new relationship with the person who died, here we think about continuing bonds, where the person may have an opportunity to wear something that belonged to their loved one, or as I said earlier, to keep something that belonged to a loved one, or write a letter to them. Maybe something that the loved one gave to them that they can revisit, and maybe if it's a photo that you took with them, frame it, any number of things. So just by all means, just let the children talk about their loved one, remember their loved one, cry about their loved one, as you as caregivers for the children may be doing the same thing, and you just do it together. You don't have to hide your grief feelings. Additional kinds of things with helping grieving children include the following. First of all, gather all of the resources that you can find. And before, at the end of this presentation, I will be talking to you about some resources. But gathering resources, gathering people that can help, whether it's a clergyman, whether it's a nurse, whether it's a physician, family friend, any person or things that can help. Do gather all your resources together. And another thing that is so very important here is to take care of your own grief. Um, we can't do very much with helping other people if we're not taking care of our own grief needs. So I encourage you to take care of your own grief needs. And remember, you don't have to do it all alone. Get someone to help with the children, especially if you are devastated, which if you lost a spouse, for example, and you are the sole parent now for small children, you're totally devastated, and I understand that. So find someone else who can help you with the children, and that will be especially important when we talk about the funeral, for example. Have someone who can hold the child's hand and just keep them safe and feeling secure during the course of the funeral here. I said also to share your own feelings, so important. Share your tears. And don't minimize the child's feelings by saying something like, oh, you shouldn't feel that way, when the child screams about, how they hate God or how they hate their granddad or their dad for leaving. Don't minimize their feelings, but express to them that yes, you understand how they're feeling. And keep open dialogue with the children about the loved one. Talk about things they did together. Talk about how much you will all miss them. But that open dialogue is critical for all children, and certainly for grieving children. All right, talking with children about the D word. Even as adults, some people, we don't like to use the D word. What do we say? We said, she passed away. She left us. She's no longer with us. We generally don't like to say he or she died, but it's passed away, or all the terms that we use for that. Well, we need to say to the child, he died or she died. We need to use simple but accurate terminology. We've got to use proper words and phrases with them. We should not say things like we lost them. I remember reading a story of a child whose dad had died, and the mom said, "Well, we lost your dad." So the child was going around looking for dad. Well, why are you looking for dad? Because we lost him and I can't find him. So children are literal. So we want to avoid we lost him, or they passed away, they died. Some very teachable moments before a family member dies. A great opportunity would be when a pet dies. It's the chance to talk about death, to talk about what happens when someone dies. The fact that um, Fido is no longer able to move, and Fido cannot eat anymore, and he's not going to awaken. We won't be able to hold him anymore. We won't be able to pet him anymore. Um, but by all means, use those times to talk about um, the D word before it becomes necessary to talk about it in relationship to a parent or a sibling. Those teachable moments, as we call them. We need to be truthful with appropriate detail. And we don't need to give a long dissertation about it, but being as simple as we can, depending upon the age of the child. But we must be honest and we must answer them directly and not say, well, talk to your dad or talk to your mom, but being willing to talk to them. And if it's difficult to talk to them, which it is difficult, then just say, this is difficult for me to talk about. I don't know how to start, but I'm going to try and explain it to you to the best of my ability. And then asking them for feedback in terms of, what do you think about that? Or what is your understanding of what I just said to you? So validate what it is that the child heard from you is very, very helpful. But by all means, reassure them regarding their own safety and your safety, because children are concerned about, did I cause the death? Will it happen to me? And who's going to take care of me, especially in the death of a parent? So, did I cause the death? Will it happen to me? And who's going to take care of me? Another thing that's important, and I think I mentioned this earlier, let them know that nothing they said caused the death. So I wish you would die did not cause the death, and nor is there anything that they can say that would have prevented the death. And it's important for them to be aware of that. All right, now, so the person has died, and we have been told them about the death. Now the question becomes for attending the funeral. How do we help prepare children for attending the funeral? We said earlier that it's a myth about whether children should or should not attend the funeral, but the important thing is to give the child a choice. Include the child in the decision for them to attend or not. Let them decide if they want to go. And if they do decide to go, prepare them for what to expect. That preparation includes telling them what they will see, what they will hear. For instance, if there's going to be a funeral in which the body will be there, let them know that grandpa's body, physical body, will be there, that he will look as if he's asleep, but he is dead. He's not just asleep, he's dead. And that he doesn't hurt, and he can't feel anything, and he can't hear anything. But also let him know that that there will be flowers, um, if there will be flowers. Let them know also if there are going to be people who will be highly emotional. Let them know that there will be sadness, there will be crying, there will be people screaming, there may be people falling on the floor, depending upon what culture it is and the like. In other words, explain everything that you can in terms of what the child can expect to see and hear during that funeral. Also, let them know what will be done, that there will be singing and there will be talking. People will get up and they will be saying things about the person who died, and they will be, um, there may be something that will make people laugh, and there will be things that will make people cry. Let the child know that, so that they are not so fearful of of the unknown, which we all are fearful of the unknown, but let them know what to expect. And if at all possible, have the child be accompanied by someone who may not be as closely involved with the death, maybe a family friend that the child knows, that can then comfort the child and just sit with them the whole time and talk to them and answer questions as they arise. Because people who are directly involved, such as in the case of, say, a spouse who's lost the other loved one, the husband who's lost the wife, or vice versa, it will be very difficult for them to help their children when they are um, devastated themselves. So if you can have a family friend to help to be with the children if they do decide to go, that's also very, very helpful. Another thing that's important here is that if the children want to be involved in the service, let them. If there's something they would like to read, or if they'd like to write something in memory of their dad or their mom or their brother, let them do that and encourage them if they want to do it, to support them in their effort. So these are all ways to prepare them for attending the funeral. Now, if it's a memorial service where there's usually not a body present, and then explain to him or her, what might happen at the memorial service. So if the child does want to go, give them permission to go, but prepare them, and give them the option to go or not to go. Give them the option to participate or not to participate. Encourage the child to ask questions, because in that way you will then be able to answer what they're concerned about, because it's always easy for us to try to guess what they're concerned about. That may not be their concern at all, but encourage them to ask questions. Spend one-on-one time with the child or the children during acute grief periods. And by all means, don't over spiritualize the death. Oh, well, the Lord wanted another beautiful flower for his garden, or another angel, or someone to be another angel. So don't over spiritualize the death. And let them know what, as close as possible, what to expect now that their dad has died, or their mom has died, or their big brother has died. If there's some way that you can anticipate what might come in the next few days, next few weeks, in terms of the sadness and the crying, and but we'll get through this together, always reassuring them that yes, we'll get through this together. And let them know that life is going to be a little bit different now, and that it is not at all their fault. All right, so I've touched upon some of the key issues and concerns in grief and grieving children. And there are a number of resources, tremendous resources, and I've just scratched the surface, even in terms of the actual content about supporting grieving children. But the resources that are available, there are support groups. Children's support groups are a great way to help kids with their grief experiences. One comes to mind is the Dougie Center, and they've got chapters at various places around the country. Part of what happens with children, they don't like to feel different. They don't want to be singled out as being different. So to lose a family member means you're different, and they don't want to be different. So they don't want other people to know about it. They don't want to feel different. But if they can join a group where there are people such as themselves who have also lost a mom, a dad, or a sibling, then it helps normalize it for them. So that is so important for them. There are also resources in terms of print numerous books, beautifully written books for children on grief and grieving. The Centering Corporation, which is a bereavement book company, the largest in the country actually, they have one of the co-founders of that has a number of books on especially for grief in children. So, Centering Corporation is on the web. Just dial in www.centeringcorporation.org, I believe, and find resources there for grieving children. There are books, there are puzzles, there are games, there are videos and DVDs and CDs and all kinds of things that are available for children as well as adults, by the way. So if there are adults listening to me, that there are resources available for adults as well, but certainly also for children. Bereavement camps. I had the wonderful opportunity to spend some time serving as a camp nurse at the Comfort Zone Camp. Comfort Zone Camp is a bereavement camp for children. It was founded, I think 10, 15 years ago, and they started out in Richmond, Virginia, and now they have camps in New Jersey, California, Texas, did I say New Jersey? Several states around the country, and it is free to children who participate. I think I can't remember if it's on a sliding scale or not, but it is a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for grieving children. I watch the children come in at the beginning of camp, and usually the parents are kind of pulling them as they come, almost kicking and screaming, not quite. And at the end of the camp, they don't want to leave. It is such a therapeutic environment, a place where the children can have fun, they can remember their loved one, it's wonderful. It is so wonderful. So Comfort Zone Camp is also on the web. If you're interested in that for your children, do look into that resource. There are a number of internet resources. Childgrief.org, there are articles on there, information, wonderful, wonderful resources. Childrensgrief.net, child parenting, hospicenet.org has grief in children information. Another resource that's really, really quite fascinating is the SesameStreet.org site, where there is an hour-long presentation with the Muppets. Katie Couric and the Muppets have a 1 hour presentation on grieving children. And that site, they have information on there that you can download. You can download the video. And for children's grief organizations, you can actually get a pack from them, a kit that includes all the videos and the like. But you can log on to www.sesamestreet.org/grief and listen to Big Bird and Cookie Monster and all those favorite children's characters talk about grief in the family. Hello Grief is actually the website of Comfort Zone Camp, where they have kind of branched out now to dealing with grief in that way. Open to Hope Foundation is a site that's got information on grief in children, grief in adults, child loss, parent loss, spousal loss, all kinds of grief. A wonderful, wonderful resource. They also have DVDs on there, short video clips, and the like. Compassionate Friends, I cannot say enough about Compassionate Friends. which is an organization for bereaved parents. I know it very well because I became a compassionate friend when my daughter died, and that was part of what saved me was participating in Compassionate Friends. They do reach out to siblings as well, so that's a great site to visit. And basically, I'd suggest just if you Google childhood grief, you find so many resources on the net. And when you do that, you will actually find the address and phone number for each of those sites. So it's a great way to find out what's available for grieving children. So childhood grief, just Google it, and there you'll have it. So to kind of summarize tonight's presentation, grieving is an individual experience, and there's no time frame or no one right way to grieve. We all do it differently. But grieving children need parents and teachers and others to serve as role models for them. They need to be able to let the child know it's okay to cry, it's okay to feel sad. And they also need us to normalize death and grief by having an open discussion about death and dying and grieving. Children really have been the forgotten mourners for so long because they grieve and they play, and they play and they grieve. They alternate. They don't stay in grief for very long periods. And we thought that children were really over their grief. Well, they are the forgotten mourners, and they don't get over it any more quickly than the old people do, than us old folks, shall I say. Children do need permission to grieve, and we can give them that permission to grieve by modeling proper grieving behavior, which is sharing our feelings and not hiding the tears. Um, Children do actively grieve even though they don't look like it. And children will also revisit grief in each stage of development because as they grow older, they learn more about loss and have a better understanding about it. And so they revisit their grief again at that level. So in some ways, they relive grief a lot more than the adults do. So that is so important for grieving children that we remember that they grieve at the developmental stage they are, and that they will revisit it as they get older and as they understand the loss more. So if we as teachers and parents and friends and healthcare providers and the like help children to grieve and grow, they will have a healthy grieving experience and learn to live life fully. With that, I want to say thank you for the opportunity to share with you this evening. And I will open the chat box for you to send me any questions or comments that you may have. Just as a way here, there's my email address, and there's the top title of my book that you saw earlier in the program, Her Light Still Shines, and it's available through Amazon.com and iUniverse.com. So with that, I will look at the chat box and see what kinds of comments have come to us. So let's see here. What do we have? All right. Nicholas says, if relocations are chronic, such as in military families, can the effects extend into the child's adulthood? Nicholas, I would answer that by saying that the frequent moves will require that we treat that as a grief experience, but trying to help the child with that, giving them a chance to ask questions, help prepare them for the relocations, and help them to, as they go through it. If we don't do that, I suspect that the effects can extend into the child's adulthood. So one way to prevent that is to try to get the caregivers to prepare the child for the move, to minimize the effects of of the move, where they are constantly changing schools and teachers and all of that. So that'll be very, very helpful. Okay, how do you? There's a hi, Dr. Ruff. Hi. How do you help a child to grieve when the child is the cause of the death, either by accident or intentionally? Well, there's kind of like two questions there. If the cause of the death by accident or intentionally. But at either rate, how do you help the child? You've got to start with helping them to work through the absence of the person with outside of the cause of the death. Just the fact that the loved one is no longer there. And then in that way, um, you're avoiding you're avoiding blame, so to speak. So part of the issue will be to not blame the child, but to help them. We talked about the developmental task of grieving, helping them to grieve the loss, and looking more at some of those issues as opposed to um, when the child caused the death. And I think in this case, it would certainly be what we'd call a complicated grief situation. And I would strongly encourage that the child get some professional help in that area, because that is definitely a complicated situation. So professional help would be appropriate, I believe. Thanks, Carolyn. Hi. How to help children who are dealing with loss of their parents because they've been separated from their parents because they have been neglected. Okay, that's one of those situations similar to what I was talking about when there is a situation of abuse of alcohol or drugs, I believe. How do you help children who are dealing with the loss of their parents? And I think that dealing with that loss is basically regardless to why they were separated. If you separate out the fact that they were separated from their parents, you've got to again have them go through the developmental task and thinking about that, where they acknowledge the loss. And in this case, it wasn't death, but it was a loss. So acknowledging the loss, helping them cope with that, facing that, and letting them grieve, encouraging them to talk about them, what that meant to them, how they felt about it, will be very, very important here. So those developmental tasks would apply in the loss of parents who are separated from the children also. Another question here is, what happens to children that don't or aren't allowed to grieve? Well, there are some beliefs that children who aren't allowed to grieve, they carry it into their adulthood, and then it can result in anxiety and depression. So that happens many times. That, in fact, we have found in some cases, in some of the research that's shown that a lot of people who are incarcerated have unresolved grief from childhood. So it can have some disastrous effects. And here again, we would encourage them, if they are now adults and have not been allowed to grieve, that we'd encourage them to seek professional help in that area. And that was from Teresa. Jemima, if the child lost his or her mom during the birth process, when do you start talking about it, and how do you explain it to him or her? During the birth process, when do you start talking about it? It's going to be important here for the caregivers to perhaps start as soon as the child begins to have some understanding of mom and the separation between the child and the parent. And it's going to be different for different ages, but certainly it may come perhaps closer to school age, when they really, actually probably a little bit earlier than that, 4, 5-ish, where they can see the separation between self and parent, self and mom, and beginning to talk then, and also understanding or explaining that your mom is not here. I'm your mom's surrogate, or I'm your foster mom, or whatever the case may be. But it kind of depends upon the situation, and here again, it might be appropriate to think about looking at a counseling situation to see what might be best for that particular child. Loretta, how can a nurse help a child to grieve the loss of a body part or body function? Well, Loretta, one of the things about loss is loss occurs as a result of not only loss of loved ones due to death, but also losses due to health, and health-related loss of a body part or body function is a tremendous loss. And that takes some getting used to, as you explained to them, in terms of helping them be able to learn to live without that body part, and adapting to the new life. Now, part of what will be important here is, when did they lose the body part or the body function, and what adaptation has been possible. For example, if it's the loss of an extremity, is a prosthesis available, and has that been used, and the like. So it kind of depends upon when the loss occurred and the nature of the loss. But certainly, the key here for any kind of adjustment to loss will be talking to the child about, how do you feel? How does this make you feel? Opening the lines of communication, letting them know it's all right to ask questions, giving as much information to them as possible, but encouraging them to ask questions. This would be also an opportunity to use some of the anatomically correct mannequins or dolls, where if it's a young child, where they can just describe or talk to you about the child who may not have a leg or fingers, or whatever the case may be. So those are all some things that would be helpful. How do you? This is Chimdina. How do you talk to a child who lost his mom when he was just 7 years old? There would be a couple questions here about how to, what was he told, and when was he told about the death of his mom? How much does he remember? What does he know? So I would start by asking him, what do you know about your mom's death? Um, and find out what he was told and asking him what he was told, as opposed to adults saying, well, we told him such and such. Ask him, what does he know? What has he heard? And what does he think about that? And finding out, what does he think about the fact that his mom died in whatever way it was that she died. So that's where I would start, with asking him, what does he know? What has he heard? And what does he think about that? All right. Oh, this was, she says, I mean 7 months old, not 7 years. Okay. Talking to a child. Well, at 7 months old, um, there's probably not much that I'd recommend you say just yet, but focusing more on comfort and security, meeting the needs, the comfort and security needs of a 7 month old, as opposed to talking to them about the death of their mom. But as they grow older, it will be important to uh, have a name and a title for his primary caregiver. Is it his grandmother? Is it his aunt or his big sister or whomever? So that that name, that person, because to him that person is his primary caregiver. That's the only person he knows, and that's like his mom. So later on, you'll want to begin to differentiate between um, the primary caregiver and their mom, and then begin to talk about mom is not here and mom died, but no time in the immediate future at 7 months old. Okay, thank you, Cora. That was great. Thanks, Teresa. I'm glad. Abisola, how do you help a child grieve when he or she constantly internalizes emotions related to the loss and refuses to talk to anyone about it? Help a child grieve. That's an interesting question, Abisola, because I don't know how old this child is, but at certain ages they do refuse to talk. They refuse to talk to their parents. If the loss was of a parent, um, they will probably refuse to talk to the next in line, the next caregiver, because as they, this is at an older age, perhaps, but here they don't want to make you sad, so they're not going to talk about it in your presence. They will. So you'll have to find somebody outside of the family, somebody they trust, somebody they are willing to talk to about it. But they are trying to protect their primary caregivers. So as I said, I don't know how old this child is who constantly internalize um, and refuses to talk to about it. But I would suggest trying to find someone they're willing to talk to about it. Ask them, who would they like to talk to about it? Would they like to talk to? Would they like to go to a camp for grieving children? That would be a great place, because they at first they are reluctant to talk about their loved one, their mom or their dad, but they have opportunities to write on the big chalkboard, to draw pictures of them, to write letters to them. So that might be a great place to get this child who refuses to talk to anyone about it, to get them to comfort zone camp. I think that would do wonders. Anik, why do some families refuse to talk about the cause of a mother's death to the child? Well, there are any number of reasons they might refuse to talk about the cause of the death. They may be uncomfortable with the cause of the death themselves. If the death was caused by violence, or such as homicide or suicide or things that are difficult for the family to deal with, they will not want to talk about the cause of the death. And the cause may not be as important at first, but it may be more important to just talk about the death. And then um, as the child grows and matures, then the cause can enter. But that would certainly make it difficult to talk about the cause of the death to the child. Perhaps they're afraid to frighten the child or create over concern for the child and the like. So that could certainly influence families' resistance to talk about the cause of the death. All right. He lost his mom at 7 months old and grew up to see his auntie as his mom. Okay, so that's back to the situation with the 7 month old. Right. He's seeing his auntie, who's his primary caregiver, as his mom. And so it's going to be important that the aunt differentiate between herself and his real mom. And she needs to begin to do that. Not yet, because he's still an infant. As I said, the most important thing right now is to meet his needs for security and protection and his basic needs of comfort and eating and sleeping and all that. And later on, as the child gets older, begin to slowly introduce the aunt as, I'm your aunt, but I take care of you and I'm going to be here for you and I will always be here for you. I'm not your mom, I'm your aunt, and I love you and I will be here for you as long as I can, forever, or whatever the case may be. All right, let's see. Andrew, do we disclose to a child that he or she is in the terminal stage of an illness? If yes, how do we say it? That's interesting, Andrew, because children know a lot. Children know a lot, and we don't give them credit for it. I'm reminded of a friend who was sharing with me just today, actually. Her daughter had a miscarriage. But before she had the miscarriage, and she's got a child who's, I want to say 2 or no, maybe 3. I'm not sure how old the child is, but she said the child had his head on the mom's lap, and he said to the mom, "You have music in your belly." I think it was music, some word that he used that he could hear. He said, "And you've got music in your belly, mommy." And then after the miscarriage, when he placed his head on his mom's lap, he said, "Mommy, the music is all gone." So children, I don't, we don't know how children know some of the things that they know. I'm reminded of another situation where a child's pet, their dog, had to be euthanized. And the child had not been told it was going to happen, but the child was at the table eating. And all of a sudden, the child screamed out the dog's name. Well, when the mother talked to the father, who had taken the dog to be euthanized, talked to the father later about the time that the process actually took place, it was the very time that the child had screamed out the dog's name. Now, what that was, I don't know. So I use those 2 examples to say to you, children know a lot. And you say, how do we disclose to a child that he or she is in the terminal stages of an illness? My guess is the child knows it. Now, the question becomes, is the family willing to talk to the child about that? Because the child likely already knows it. And if so, if yes, and I would say yes, how do you say it? Part of what's important here is to talk about what the child knows, find out what the child knows, what he believes, and what he thinks about that. And if depending upon the religious beliefs and practices in the family, this would be a time to talk about the family's belief about what happens after death, and keeping that as simple as possible, but also bringing in some of that. But starting out with, what do you think is wrong, and what does that mean to you, and how do you feel about that? Asking the child for their what they know, what they think about it, and how they feel about it will then give you some ammunition, if you will, some words to then work with as you begin to open the discussion with your kids. But I would say that the child probably already knows, but is waiting or needs the parent or caregivers to be willing to talk to them about it, because they will have questions about lots of things, and find out what questions they have, and if necessary, have a support person there with you when you're talking to them. If they are hospitalized, there may be a social worker there, or a grief support person, or clergy person who can help you with this discussion in the initial stages. But I think the child has a right to know, and the child has a right to be able to talk to their caregivers about what they're worried about, what they're afraid of, and the like. All right, Ike says, how do you help a child who intentionally or accidentally causes the death? And I think there was something similar that I answered earlier about that. You basically help the child as you would any child who's grieving, regardless of the relationship to the cause of the death, starting with finding out what the child already knows about what caused the death, what does death mean to them, having the death discussion with them apart from their hand in it, and let their hand in it be a totally different subject. But your primary goal is to support the child and help the child grieve, not to point a finger. So I would hold the discussion in relationship to having the death discussion with them. Um, what happens when the person dies? All of those kinds of things. Helping them to grieve, helping them, letting them know it's okay to cry, being open to answer their questions, and that kind of thing, and not deal with the cause of the death at this point. Now, during the course of the discussion, they will probably say, but it's all my fault. And then that's when you need to talk about um, what makes you think it's your fault, and let them describe why they feel it's their fault. What did they do? What did they say? And here again, keep asking them how they came to that conclusion, how they feel about it. But this child will need, more than likely, some professional support here, some professional counseling, if they are, connected with the death of someone, whether it was intentionally or accidentally. All right. Izina says, in the culture that I come from, children are rarely looked at as having capacity to grieve. Is there any lasting negative consequences to watch for? Well, traditionally, we didn't think that children grieved either, but we are learning more and more that yes, they do grieve. The important thing here, in terms of lasting negative consequences, the research does show that children who don't have a chance to grieve do have anxiety and or who are at risk more often for depression and anxiety in adulthood. So that's one of the things that can happen if children don't aren't allowed to grieve. But it's never too late, and if if there's some way for you, Izina, to actually, you know, talk to the child and begin to work with them now, it's never too late to address some of those grief issues that may come up. All right. Thank you so very much for your questions. They've all been wonderful, wonderful questions. I see it is now an hour and 20 minutes since we've been going at this. So I would like to basically um, say thank you again for joining us. Thank you again for your wonderful, wonderful questions. And just remember, keep the lines of communication open, open the lines of communication, find out what the child wants, give the child information, simple information, honest information, and get their input, get their feedback, and give them options. And it will go a long way in helping our children to grieve the death of their loved one. With that, I'm going to bid you all a good evening and a good rest of the week. Thank you very much. Good evening.